I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but as of next month, music class will no longer be offered at Greenfield Primary. Helen Marsh, 44-year-old head teacher at Greenfield Primary School in Shepherd's Bush, West London, stood at the front of the staff room on a grey Monday morning in February 2006 and said those words to 11 teachers who had been expecting them and were still not ready to hear them. The staff room was small and warm, mismatched chairs around a low table, a kettle that never fully stopped making noise. Children's artwork pinned to a corkboard on the far wall in vivid splashes of finger-painted red and yellow and green, the kind of cheerful chaos that primary schools accumulate without trying. The budget cuts had been coming for 3 months. Everyone knew. The governors had reviewed every department. Music was the smallest, the most expensive per student, and the hardest to justify on a spreadsheet. One teacher, 12 guitars, a battered upright piano in the corner of the assembly hall, and 40 children every week who left the class louder and happier than they had arrived. None of that appeared on the metrics that mattered to the people making the decisions. Anna Kowalski, 31 years old, Greenfield Primary's only music teacher, sat in the chair nearest the window and looked at her hands in her lap and said nothing. She had been teaching music at Greenfield for 4 years. She had 40 students currently enrolled in after-school guitar club. She had 3 children who had never spoken a full sentence in class but sang every word of every song from the first lesson. She knew exactly what canceling music class meant for those children specifically, and she had no argument that would fit on a spreadsheet. After the meeting, she went to the assembly hall, sat down at the battered upright piano, and played for 20 minutes by herself in the empty room. Not for any reason. Just because she needed to. What Anna did not know was that the assembly hall had a side door that opened onto the school's main corridor, and that the main corridor connected to the school's front entrance, and that a man had arrived at that front entrance 7 minutes earlier for a reason that had nothing to do with budget cuts or music programs or any of this at all. Keith Richards was there because his granddaughter attended Greenfield Primary. His daughter Angela had called him the previous week in a panic, not about music programs, about a parent-teacher meeting she couldn't attend because of a work commitment that couldn't be moved. Keith had agreed to go in her place with the easy, uncomplicated willingness of a grandfather who enjoys being involved and doesn't make it complicated. He had dressed for the occasion in his own particular way. A vivid emerald green linen shirt under a worn black leather jacket, slim dark trousers boots, silver rings on every finger, his wild silver-streaked hair doing what it always did, which was everything it wanted. He had arrived on time, which his daughter had specifically requested, and had been directed by the receptionist to wait in the main corridor while she found the relevant teacher. The corridor was bright and vivid. Walls painted in deep sunshine yellow, children's paintings mounted in colorful frames at child height along both sides, lockers in cobalt blue and cherry red, the ceiling lights warm and generous. Keith stood in this corridor with his hands in his jacket pockets and looked at the children's artwork the way he looks at things he finds genuinely interesting, slowly, with complete attention. Through the side door at the far end of the corridor came the sound of a piano. Keith turned toward it. He stood for a moment listening. What he was hearing was not a performance. It was someone playing the way people play when they believe no one is listening. Directly, without presentation, the music going somewhere because the person playing it needed it to go somewhere and had nowhere else to send it. He recognized that quality of playing immediately and completely. He walked toward the sound. He pushed the side door open quietly and stood in the doorway of the assembly hall. The room was large and high-ceilinged, morning light coming through tall windows on the left. In wide pale gold columns, rows of folding chairs stacked along the back wall, a climbing rope hanging from the ceiling near the far corner, a hand-painted banner in the children's red and yellow, reading Greenfield Got Talent, pinned above the small stage. And at the battered, upright piano against the right wall, her back to the door, sat Anna Kowalski in a bright cobalt blue cardigan, playing. Keith stood in the doorway and listened for 4 minutes without moving and without announcing himself. When Anna finished, she sat with her hands in her lap for a moment. Then she sensed something and turned around. She saw a man in an emerald green shirt and a leather jacket standing in the doorway with silver rings on every finger and wild silver-streaked hair and the most recognizable face in rock and roll. Anna Kowalski, who had been a Rolling Stones fan since she was 14, who had Exile on Main Street on vinyl in her flat, who had poster from the 1975 Tour of the Americas on her bedroom wall, looked at Keith Richards standing in the doorway of her school assembly hall and said with complete honesty, "I'm sorry. Am I in your way?" Keith Richards smiled. It was a real smile. Deep lines around his eyes, warm and unguarded, the smile of a man genuinely amused by the world and grateful for it. "No love," he said, his voice low and graveled. "I'm in yours." "That was beautiful. What's wrong?" Anna blinked. "Sorry?" "You were playing like something was wrong," Keith said simply. He walked into the assembly hall the way he walks everywhere. Without hurry, without announcement, completely at ease. He pulled a folding chair from the nearest stack, set it down beside the piano, and sat in it backwards with his arms resting on the back. His emerald green shirt caught the pale gold morning light. His silver rings glinted. He looked at Anna with the direct, unhurried attention of someone who has all the time in the world and means it. "Tell me." Anna told him. She told him about the budget cuts, and the governor's decision, and the 40 children in guitar club, and the 3 children who only spoke in music class, and the spreadsheet that couldn't account for any of it. She told him about 4 years of building something real in a school that needed it. She told him all of it with the directness of someone talking to a stranger in a corridor on a morning when she had run out of people to tell it to. Keith listened without interrupting. He asked one question at the end. "How much?" Anna frowned. "Sorry? How much does it cost to keep the program running?" "Per year." Anna told him the number. It was not a large number. It was the kind of number that disappears without trace in the kind of life Keith Richards has lived for 60 years. Keith nodded once. He reached into the pocket of his leather jacket and produced a business card, worn at the corners, simply printed, and placed it on top of the piano. "Call that number this afternoon," he said. "Tell them Keith sent you. The program will be funded, for as long as it needs to be." Anna looked at the card, then at Keith Richards, then at the card again. "You can't just." "I can," Keith said pleasantly. "I do it all the time. Nobody writes about it because I ask them not to." He stood up from the folding chair, returned it to the stack with the easy domestic efficiency of someone entirely comfortable in school assembly halls, and picked up his leather jacket from where he draped it on the chair back. "Those kids who only talk in music class," he said, pausing at the doorway. "I was one of those kids, in Dartford, long time ago." He looked at Anna with an expression that was warm and clear and carried 60 years of understanding behind it. "Don't let them take it." He left the assembly hall and walked back up the bright, sunshine yellow corridor to wait for the teacher who was going to tell him about his granddaughter's progress. Past the cobalt blue lockers and the cherry red lockers and the vivid finger-painted artwork on the walls, exactly as he had arrived. Quietly, without announcement, as though nothing had happened at all. The music program at Greenfield Primary was never canceled. The funding arrived within the week, anonymously through a private foundation, and continued to arrive every year without interruption. Helen Marsh, the head teacher, received the first transfer and sat at her desk for a long time trying to understand where it had come from. Anna Kowalski received a single text message that afternoon from an unknown number. It said, "Keep going, Kay." She still has it.